Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good following morning. This is AMA number 82. Today is January 27th, 2022, and it is the 77th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It's International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We have very special guests today, 3 Holocaust survivors, who we'll get to in a few minutes. We're very excited for them to join us. 3 great friends of the JCC, Zosia, Bernard Offen, and Marcel Zieliński. But first, I'm here with my beloved co-host, just off a flight from Israel, Rabbi Avi Baumol.
Off of a snowstorm, even. Good evening or good afternoon. It's the 25th day of Shvat. And I'm happy to be back here in Krakow and for a very important podcast to participate in the Holocaust Remembrance. And listen, we're in Krakow and it certainly carries that much more weight for us to remember. And we remember by speaking to the people that are close to us, who've been with us for so long and who continue to inspire us. Right.
Absolutely. So we're going to get to those 3 really absolutely inspiring people. We're so lucky. All 3 have actually been on the AMA before, but not together. And this is exciting. I think so. We'll talk to them in a few minutes. Just talk to a couple other things before we do that. One, a little COVID update. We are in the 5th wave. So soon we're going to be getting to the song, the Sting song, "Love is the 7th wave." We are in the 5th wave of COVID. 58,000 cases today in Poland, which is a massive, massive number. Omicron is 40%. So here comes Omicron, and we are expecting over 100,000 cases next week. School, remote teaching for kids 12 and up. They did a program which sounded great, but didn't really work, which was free antigen tests for at Polish drugstores for everybody. But actually only 64 pharmacies have signed up so far. So it's 0.1% of the pharmacies, so not exactly what they were hoping, and that's where we are with COVID. So still behind the U.S. and Israel. Israel is still numbers are still high. Avi,
very high. I think there were 70,000 new cases yesterday. I mean, the numbers just skyrocketed. We have the most vaccines and the most Omicron per capita. So
how do we explain that? We can't call it anti-Semitism.
Our numbers are starting to go down. We're a tight-knit country. I don't know. I don't have any good answer for it.
It's fascinating. Israel was at the lead, first getting everybody vaccinated, the first to get people vaccinated, the first to get people boosted, and the first to get people now fourth one. And yet, so this is not boding well for the argument with the anti-vaxxers when the country with the most vaccinations has the most cases of COVID.
Here's the argument. The argument is that we have the most cases of COVID and we have one of the lower death rates.
There you go.
So that is the whole point that the vaccination has accomplished. We're not saying that people won't get sick, people will get flus, but the hospitals are managing, and there are only 700 in the country, 700 severe cases. The numbers have gone way down in terms of mortality. That's the answer, I suppose. But
it's interesting. So many of these things are really about the messaging, right? The communication. So global warming, we made the mistake. The mistake was made to call it global warming. And then every time the winter is colder, which sometimes happened in this idea of the, global warming, the people who are sort of don't believe in science can point to that. Whereas instead of calling it, cataclysmic or catastrophic climate change, which is what it really is, sometimes warmer, sometimes cooler, but based on warming, there's that. So you have this issue. So with COVID, I think we didn't know, nobody knew, it's no one's fault, but had it been said, we need to vaccinate people because it keeps them from dying, as opposed to keeps them from getting the virus, as most vaccinations do. Listen, we're all going to get it, but that's not the point. You're going to die if you're not vaccinated, or you have a greater chance of dying or getting very sick if you're not vaccinated, then that maybe would have been better messaging. But who knew, right?
Right. Another thing is that the new government, which is not so new, was very responsive to what the previous government did and the country railed against. The previous government solved the COVID problem by killing the economy because it shut the whole country down for large periods of time, and then no one was able to work, and everyone was complaining about that. Of course, they were complaining about that then. They weren't complaining that the numbers were low in terms of the death rate. And then the new government said, we're not shutting down the economy. So now they're complaining to the new government that they allowed us to have the highest rate. I don't want to go into politics, that's for sure.
Yeah, no question. Just see some comments.
Very Auschwitz of me.
Benji is...
Sure.
Benji, hold on Benji is asking if it's inappropriate to get our thoughts on the NFL playoffs today. Mirav, hey Mirav, says I'm a rock star. Not quite, but thank you. And Benji is saying that Israel has the highest rate of cases to Lamed Vavnikim. Present company excluded. Avi, do you want to give some your thoughts on the NFL playoffs?
I didn't really check it so well. I watched some highlights about New England and not New England, but Tampa Bay, and I don't really know the Rams, that they seem excited, and Beckham Jr. and Green Bay, and no, Green Bay's out too. So who's left?
Very good update, Avi. Better than more. You know more about it than I do. I am but both of us much bigger NBA fans.
Yeah. Jonathan, just really a side point, but I did watch some highlights of Ja Morant. Oh my Lord, oh my Hashem, as we like to say. That guy he's an adrenaline, like I've never seen such an effort from him.
I take Michael Jordan, I don't say his name in vain, and I don't throw around comparisons, but I will say that Ja Morant, if there's anyone that I've ever seen since Jordan that is Jordanian, it is.
Listen, it has to be a new animal.
Ja Morant, Jordanian.
But I've never really seen someone with such passion anyway.
He doesn't need the ball all the time, Avi. This is an amazing thing. But Avi, let's segue into our
more somber
today, really, which is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We focus so much on the future and on the survivors, and just with the stories of hope and this, but sometimes I think because we're so focused on life, we can forget about, not forget, but we can I think that we feel sometimes there's so much focus on tragedy and loss that it's up to us here in Krakow at the JCC to focus so much on life in the future. But it doesn't mean that we don't also look back and remember what was lost and the unimaginable loss. And I think that maybe being so close to it for us here makes it maybe even in a way a little more difficult for us to look at it, just because it could overwhelm us. But we do need to do that. And today is one of the days, of course, that we do on the anniversary of the liberation of the camp of Auschwitz 77 years ago today.
Listen, we are invited, throughout the year to different memorials. And if it's in my own family, then I'm invited to the specific place where I lost members of my family, and then they have their specific memorial then. So nevertheless, January 27th is a day that we kind of talk about it in general and reflect, because listen, I've been here 8 years, you've been here 20, but it's become part of our identity of being in Krakow and being around survivors and being in a place that, until, recently was darkness for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And it's something that we constantly have to remind ourselves of. What would Krakow look like today? What would Poland, with millions and millions of Jews, how would this just the entire concept of Jewish Europe and Jews be with without a Holocaust. It's a staggering thought.
It's staggering. I'm going to we have a ceremony at the JCC where we have candles lit in the shape of 77. I'm not sure how visible that is, but we're going to try. See if that's going.
A little bit.
A little bit. Maybe we'll check in a little bit later. Thanks, Seb, for that. And we can go back. Avi, you just before we bring our guests in, Patrick, our good friend Patrick, the consul general here in Krakow, is writing that Ambassador Zieliński represented the U.S. today at the commemoration in Auschwitz. Good to see you too, Patrick. Thank you for letting us know. There's always, of course, a ceremony there at Auschwitz. Last year, I was actually at this point on the road. We walked, Kasha, Ryan, and I did that walk, which was, I'm happy to be indoors this year, I'll put it that way. But Avi, your family is, you maybe quickly tell us, you have a very personal, close connection with the survivors in your family.
Well, I have many, too many because we don't have that much time, but this year in particular, and I think I might have mentioned it, there was a special memorial, once again, done by Dariusz Popiela to renovate or to give a sort of memorial in Nowy Targ, which is Newmark. And there's mass graves there and 1,000 names of people who were murdered there. In their records, they found a testimony that was given right after the war. And the testimony of Miriam Dryla, who was there at the time in Nowy Targ. And when I read this, I started crying and a chill kind of went down my spine, and I translated it into English. So it's just one paragraph. In June 1942, all the Jews were rounded up in the center of Nowy Targ. While being rounded up, a woman, Eva Stotarov, was shot on the road. She was living in an apartment in the street called Sobieski. At the same time, there was a woman named Baumol living there, Sarah Baumol, wife of Rav Nachum, grandfather of my Zaida, my grandfather. So it's my great-great-grandmother who was living in Nowy Targ. She was 85 years old. After a few days, 2 Gestapo appeared in civilian clothes at 9 p.m. One of them wanted to kill her right then and there, sitting on her bed. However, the other, when he saw the little children around her, said it would be better to take the woman out to the courtyard to kill her. I was told to take her out together with her daughter, Pessa Halberstam. At the time of moving her, her daughter started to cry, and one of the Gestapo took out his gun and put it in her face, saying, "If you don't want to end up with the same fate, you better stop crying." They shot her twice and killed her, and I was told to bury her in the Jewish cemetery. Despite nighttime and heavy rain, I took the shot woman out to the cemetery. She was connected to the action of the Gestapo from Zakopane, which decided that all the old, sick, and disabled people should be killed. There's a picture that I have of my great-great-grandmother, who is sitting in the middle there, surrounded by her family. And it's obviously one of 6 million cases, and it's something that certainly gives me great pause and reminds me of, we're trying to rebuild here because such a powerful light was almost completely extinguished in my family and in Poland in general. So that's a little bit of the story that I've learned since I'm here, and I hope we do our share in bringing light back to the Jewish community.
Amen. Let's bring in our guests. I think 2 of our guests are with us, and one I hope will be logging in very, very soon. We have with us Zosia Radzikowska.
Hi.
Pani Zosia, to her legion of fans worldwide. Pani Zosia was born in Krakow, as were our other 2 guests, in 1935. She's a lawyer, an opposition activist during the communist times here. And she is involved in many things. And besides that is our most active JCC member, as we always say, which is absolutely the God's honest truth. And Bernard Offen, born in 1929, looking good, young man. Bernard grew up from Krakow as well, survived the Krakow ghetto and 5 concentration camps, grew up in Podgórze, and is now is a filmmaker, is an activist for Holocaust survivors, telling the story, is a guide, still goes back even the last few years to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and tells his story to many groups, and is really just an amazing figure, and a co-cyclist with me in Ride for the Living, as Zosia did also a little bit. So I have had the incredible honor not only of becoming close friends with both of you, but of getting on a bicycle from Birkenau with both of you. So welcome. We're hoping Marcel Zieliński will be able to join us, the third Krakowian survivor that we're talking to today. So he's we're waiting for him to join, but we'll begin with you guys. So first of all, welcome. You're both in Krakow. Zosia is actually in the building, and Bernard is not far away. Welcome to both of you.
Hey, everybody. Good evening, everybody.
Vitami, as we say.
Good evening, Zosia. Good evening, Rabbi.
Bernard. How are you?
Good, but isolating during this crisis of COVID.
Okay.
Otherwise, okay.
Bernard, we got to keep you young, and we got to keep you feeling good. So stay away from all the COVID people.
Yes.
Exactly. So I want to talk a little bit today, as we know, the 77th anniversary of the liberation of Birkenau, Auschwitz-Birkenau, a place that has a lot of meaning for both of you in a personal way. One, Bernard, because you were there as a prisoner, and Zosia, you were not. You were in hiding during the war, but your father was killed there. So maybe I want to start, but go back a little bit. And it's always those of us who've chosen to make our lives in Krakow. It's so fascinating to hear stories about what Krakow was like before the war. So Bernard, I want to start with you, especially also because you were a little older and I think have more memories from Krakow before the war started. But maybe tell us, how many members were in your family, Bernard? Where did you live? What did your parents, I'm guessing your father work, maybe your mother, but I'm not sure. Can you talk a little bit about that? What your family situation was like before the war?
Yes, we lived on Krakusa number 9, which is right in Podgórze. And we were a family of 6 people. There were 4 siblings, my 2 older brothers who have departed now, and my sister Miriam. And my father was a traveling salesman who traveled around the Krakow area and sometimes a little further. And my mother was a seamstress. We lived in a working class neighborhood of Podgórze. And in the back of our apartment building was a chocolate factory, a 5-story chocolate factory named Optima, which during the war became a factory for making boots for the German army, and also a clothing factory. So everything changed.
Bernard, were you religious? What do you remember about your Jewish identity? How religious? Did you guys go to synagogue? Did any of your brothers have a bar mitzvah? Because they were older. You would have still been, I think, too young before the war.
Of course, we were Orthodox, modern Orthodox family. Our synagogue was on the corner of Limanowskiego, and of course, we practiced Shabbat and all the holidays, and of course, we were kosher. And grandmother lived in the same apartment house, and I remember playing with carp fish that grandmother was preparing for the wedding of one of her daughters. There were 3 daughters. My mother was.
And Bernard, what school did you go to, Bernard?
To a normal Polish school during the morning, but in the afternoon I went to a cater on Chaneckiego Street, and I always remember passing on the street, and sometimes kids were throwing stones at us. But hi, Marcel, I see your picture. You're looking good.
Yeah, I see you too, Bernard. Good to see you. You're a little bit out of focus.
Well, I'll see.
Marcel Zieliński.
Or maybe it's my glasses.
I'm just gonna, let me introduce Marcel, we just started talking a little bit about what we remember, or what you guys remember before the war and family situation. So I'm gonna but let me just introduce, we're excited. We had a little bit of technical.
Come here, Myla. Something's happening.
We have the wonderful Marcel Zieliński, who's also born in Krakow in 1934.
Sit down.
Dryla, his family was in Płaszów. He and his father were sent to Auschwitz. His father didn't survive. Marcel did survive and was reunited with his mother, and then went to Israel. They stayed in Poland for a while, went to Israel, and then Montreal, and that's where he's joining us from now. And we're going to ask Marcel in just a couple of minutes about his recollections of his family life a little bit before the war, and then we'll get, of course, to the war. But Zosia, you were younger, and I know you were only just turned 4 when the war broke out. But do you have any recollections? Maybe tell us first a little bit about your family, who was in your family, what they did, where you lived, and then if you remember too much about Krakow before the war.
Me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I don't remember nothing from before the war. I remember I have mother, father, and 2 aunts and grandfather. That's what I remember from my family. We probably weren't very religious family. I only just remember my father praying once, and it was moment when my mother taught me that is the way the Jews pray. So I knew we are the Jews and we pray this way. Look, we've survived the war only with my father, me and my father.
With your mother.
And my mother, yes.
But Zosia, we'll get to the war in just in a few minutes. But maybe tell, what did your father do, and did your mother work? And if so,
my father was farm maker, and my mother worked in like factory of Jewish of dentist goods. You know what is dentist goods? For dentist. So we have many.
And where did you live, Zosia?
We lived in the center of the city on Krupnicza Street.
Oh.
Yes.
Fancy.
My father lived still, my grandfather lived still on Kazimierz, but not our family. I even don't remember how Kazimierz looked before the war, because I was born on Krupnicza Street. Yes. Okay. And well, you know, my father was in the Krakow ghetto, then in the Płaszów camp, and then was taken to Auschwitz and killed there.
We're going to talk a little bit about how you, with your mother, survived during the war. Once we get to how the war, in a moment, we'll talk about once the war breaks out. But I think it's nice for us, you know, we always spend time focusing now on the future and
now
about the war, but it's always nice for us, especially so many people who are watching and have visited, know modern contemporary Krakow and have visited Krakow over the years, but it's so nice, even somebody like me, to hear these recollections about pre-war Krakow. So Marcel is also, we are joined, we're supposed to have 3 survivors, but what an incredible bonus to see the lovely Marilla Zieliński, who is also actually a survivor, and Marilla survived in hiding during the war, and is Marcel's wife for how many? Wait, let me say, 60, 50, 60. Wait, 19, 50, 45, 65 years, 62 years.
62. What?
How long are you married to Marilla?
Oh,
64.
64 will be in July.
Oh, 64.
In July.
Okay. I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back. Not a bad guess. Lovely to see you, Marilla. So Marcel, maybe talk a little bit about your family before the war, what you remember, where you lived in Krakow, what your parents did. Were you religious? What school you went to?
Yeah, okay. I was born on the 28th September 1934 in our apartment. Probably was the birth took place in the hospital, but I know that I lived in an apartment located on the Koletek Street, which is only maybe a kilometer away from JCC now.
Less, even
and
less.
I visited this place, Koletek 7, apartment number 25, which is on the 4th floor, facing the main entrance and the courtyard. I have very good recollection of my childhood when I grew up and I started remembering. And well, I remember my family, my mother and my father was a very musical family. My father was with a large family. They lived on Kupa Street, probably next to the Isaac Synagogue. I don't know exactly the number.
Next to me.
But, yeah, but he was a member of a choir in the temple. The whole family were singers and entertainers.
Huh.
And they especially one of the brothers was always telling jokes. And I met this brother, the uncle, who lived in New York City, in Brooklyn, and actually in Bronx first, and then in Queens. And we visited very, very often, always on Passover, but this is after the war. So before the war, my mother was working. She was working in a small department store located on Grodzka Street. I think it was number 60, Grodzka. And she was keeping books of the store. The store was called Grossman's. Grossman's, like a little department store.
Uh-huh.
And she was ordering stock, keeping stock and keeping evidence of the money, the flow of the money. And so she was always working. And my father was also working in fine leather gallantry, like accessories for men's fashion, like suspenders, belts. He would manufacture it, operating machines, wallets, very expensive, fine leather.
In a workshop to make leather goods.
Yeah, he was manufacturing it. He was not selling it, but he was later. He joined my grandfather. My grandfather lived on Stradom 16, I think, but this is like This is a very strange connection, because my grandmother, Regina Sternberg, divorced in the 20s, in the 1920s.
Oh.
She divorced and she married somebody by the name of Mangel, Godel Mangel, who I remember very well, because my mother would take me there very often on Friday nights, and I remember Godel very, very well. And now I'm in touch with his family here in Montreal.
Wow.
I mean, they were in Montreal, but now some of the family moved to Chicago. So I'm in touch with them now.
It's interesting. I'm guessing that divorce first of all, divorce in the 1920s in Jewish Krakow, or anywhere really in the 1920s, but in Jewish Krakow, I don't think was very common.
No, absolutely not. This was like my grandmother was like a very modern person, good looking, very pretty face. I still remember her photographs. And she liked to read books and go to theater, to coffee shops. You know, she was like a modern woman, and she was, I think, her marriage was, she couldn't handle the requirements of Jewish life, Jewish marriage. She was probably connected with her husband through somebody, you know,
like organized. Marcel, do you remember how? What about Judaism in your life? Did you keep kosher? Were you religious? Did you go to synagogue? Jewish? What about education?
Well, you know, living in when war broke out, I was 5 years old, so there was not much education for me. There was no school.
You hadn't started school yet?
No school. And then the ghetto came, right, and then Warsaw and so on. So there was no school for me.
Yeah.
And I remember my mother was always lighting candles. This I remember very well. On Friday night, she would light candles, and she would cover her eyes and they'd say a prayer. So this I remember. And occasionally we would go to temple. I think not a synagogue, but a temple. Not sure which one.
Mm-hmm.
And well, at home we were speaking Polish. The Polish language was my mother tongue.
I think for all of you, Bernard and Zosia as well. At home you spoke Polish.
No.
No, you spoke Yiddish, Bernard.
Well, actually, we did speak Polish, but Yiddish was used in the whole apartment building, which was a big apartment building of 4 stories. And so I learned Yiddish when father or mother didn't want us to understand something, they spoke Yiddish.
Yeah.
We understood.
Same story.
So I think that we can, you know, typical, it's so nice. You hear of these typical, you know, happy, regular, ordinary lives that in the, you know, in the 1930s that could have been Jews living almost anywhere. And then September 1st, 1939, I'm going to ask Bernard, because I think Bernard really has the best recollection, is a few years older than Zosia and Marcel. Bernard, do you remember the war starting? Do you remember the lead up to the war? What do you remember in terms of September 1939 and the beginning of the World War II, and what became really the Holocaust that changed your lives so drastically?
Well, we had an uncle, an aunt living on the corner of Krakusa and Limanowskiego Street, and they had I remember a Blaupunkt radio. And so I remember they were listening to Hitler and Germany and what was going on. And they were always saying that the war is not going to last very long and everything is going to be okay. So it was on the optimistic side of, what's going to come.
That the war is going to be quick and the Hitler will be defeated and everything will be okay.
Yes. And going back to your question earlier about the Jewish upbringing, what do I remember? Yes, we all had bar mitzvah, of course. My bar mitzvah was in the ghetto with my father. It was just my father and I, and he put a talit over me, and we said some prayers, and that was the end of my bar mitzvah.
Wow.
Bernard.
Yes.
I remember the first Rosh Hashanah that I was here. We went to do Tashlich on the Wisła River, and you came.
Yes.
And you pointed up and you said, "That's where I had my bar mitzvah." And you told this story, and I couldn't believe it. I'm standing and I'm having Rosh Hashanah, a Tashlich like I've never had it in my life.
Yeah, I remember that incident on Tashlit. We went to the Wisła River.
I want to ask Zosia a question because Zosia, you know, as a 4-year-old, I don't think you remembered exactly. You weren't listening to the radio as the war came. What are your earliest memories? We know that you're separated. Your father went to the ghetto, and your mother got papers for you. You pretended to be not Jewish, and that's how you survived the war. But maybe talk a little bit about your memories of this time. What do you remember your mother saying? We have to pack. We have to go. What do you remember about those early days of when your life was uprooted?
I remember only that one day we have to leave the city, and my mother already had the papers on another name, of Polish name, and my father disappeared somehow. And then, because we went to the little village just outside the Krakow, my father was in other places. And then I met him 2 or 3 times before he went to ghetto. I didn't understood, of course, that it is, you see, I can't see him anymore, but I don't know, but probably my mother decided that we stay outside the ghetto and try to live like anybody else in village. And we lived this kind of life, but we escaped before some blackmailer to another village. And all this began from the beginning, and in such a way we like living like on a free. In the same time, we had to hide our genuine Jewishness and pretend well that we are Polish Christians. We could pretend well as we spoke good Polish, and in our home we spoke Polish, and my parents only spoke Yiddish when they didn't want me to understand. So yeah. I really hated this from very beginning. And then like anyway, I didn't see my father anymore. I couldn't understand. Then father won't come back after the war, so we waited. But in the end, my father already realized that father won't come back. So he got married second time, and I got a family again, and I've got little brother and so on.
Zosia, I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but I want to just stay during the war for a moment. When you start to get older, and you're living in hiding. Well, not hiding, but you're living under an assumed identity. Did you understand what it meant to be Jewish? Did you understand that the Jews were being persecuted? Did you understand what did you understand about the large? I understand from the day to day you had to pretend your name was something, and you had to pretend that you were Christian and all this. But did you at what point did you understand the larger circumstance of what was going on? That you were part of this thing, the Jewish people were being killed. What did you understand and when?
Look, I don't remember just the moment, but I remember very well that I very soon realized that I can never, ever tell that I am Jew, because German killed Jews. That I understood, even if I didn't understand really what it means to be killed. Mm-hmm. But I did well that once. My mother somehow, you see, that taught me to be like that. So I always, I know what we are doing in church. I could pray in church.
How did you learn that, Zosia? That was my question.
Probably my mother had to teach me that, but I don't, this moment, I don't remember. Are sometimes like empty places in my memory. So I only remember I very soon can read, and I read everything what I could, and also I read my Lissy Polish prayer book. So I just behaved like any other child in the country. How I learned that, I don't really remember. I only remember that I was it, and I ever went to school, and it was like 1945 when Red Army came, and we can be free again and come back to Krakow, like begin new life, like anybody else in Poland. But it was very important moment for me. My mother sent me to a Hebrew school. Hebrew school called Tarbut, Zionistic one, only 2 years because school was closed in 1950 probably, but these 2 years were enough to build in me very strong Jewish identity. So I never forget in my life.
And we're very lucky, this happened, and we have you as so involved and in our community. I want to go stay at the wartime. Marcel, you talk a little bit about that, what you remember about the beginning of the war, about your parents, about what you knew, about being, when the war started, and this, how sudden was the change in your life?
Look, everything changed because
I'm sorry, Zosia. I was asking at this point. I was asking about. Sorry. We'll come back and talk more about after the war.
Okay. Things I remember when the war broke out. I remember very distinctly today. Broadcast radio, maybe Bernard can confirm, because he was probably listening to the radio as well in those days. And there were like messages in Polish language, of messages that didn't make any sense. I was wondering what those messages were all about. And later I figured out that those were messages used by the army to pass information to units of the army that the army couldn't, they didn't have any other means of communication other than public broadcast. So there were messages like, like chocolate, coffee, or something to eat. Obviously those messages meant something for the recipients of those messages, but not for general public. So this I remember well. Then my parents decided to escape from Krakow. So they put me on the stroller. I was still, like a 5-year-old. They put me on a stroller and they started walking towards Russian border.
You remember walking in a stroller? They just started walking east.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting in the stroller.
Yeah.
And my parents were pushing that stroller, and there were many things put on me, like warm things. And I don't know how far we went, probably not very far. The roads were very, very congested. There were horse-driven carriages, you know, farmers, and military columns were also on the road, on the same narrow roads. And we were attacked by airplanes. German airplanes were flying because the army was on the road as well. And airplanes were strafing the column. And I remember from the stories that my mother told me that, you know, it was very dangerous, and everybody was diving into the ditch. And my mother always wanted to be together with me and my father, because he said, if we're going to die, we're going to die together and survive together.
Marcel, was that the first time you remember seeing an airplane?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I asked just because later, you know, maybe not everybody knows that you went and became an aeronautical engineer. So your first, I think most people who become aeronautical engineers' first exposure to a plane wasn't being shot at by the plane.
Yeah, I didn't think about it then. No,
it's true.
It's true. Yeah.
And you went, so maybe talk us a little bit more. So you remember you go east, and how far you got, you're going east and then you stopped because?
You know, it was getting dark probably. My mother was very concerned about me because I didn't eat. I was a very poor eater. So she tried to organize something for me to eat. Now this was her major problem, to protect me as a child. I was, you know, when I was born for my parents, this was like a major miracle, because my mother's first pregnancy did not end well. She gave birth to a stillborn. So when I was born, it was like a very important thing to me. So.
So Bernard, what your memories? So you remember the actual first moment, but when did you move out of your house? Maybe talk to us a little bit about moving out of your house when you had to relocate with your family.
Well, that would be in the middle of the ghetto time. But I would like to back up a little bit about when I saw the Germans marching into Krakow for the first time.
Okay.
And there was a curfew, and you know, you're supposed to be inside the building, not on the street. I went out the house on Kakusa Street towards Limanowskiego Street to watch the soldiers marching, you know, the Germans. And the German soldier jumped down from a truck and took a shot at me. The bullet hit near my head, and the hole in that wall was still there on the Karkusa Street for many years, but it is not anymore. But I believe that because of the distance and because of what I know about being a soldier and being trained to shoot, is that he wanted to scare me. I was just a kid. Okay, so that's my belief. So I saw the soldiers marching in. And later on, before that even happened, the government opened up all the factories, all the bakeries, all the chocolate factories, everything. We went and got a lot of goods, chocolate, flour, bread, and cigarettes. I started smoking, of course.
How old? I'm sorry, Bernard. How old were you when you started smoking?
I was 10 going on 11.
And how old are you now, Bernard?
Well, I'm pushing 73. pushing 3 months, I'll be 73.
93.
93. Ah, yeah. No, I feel like 73.
You look 73.
You look at Bernard. For anybody, I think if anybody from the tobacco industry is watching and wants a spokesman, this is what happens. You start smoking at the age of 10, and you're going strong, fully healthy, better shape than most of us at 93. So
no, I quit
all the
smoking.
anti-smokers.
But he didn't inhale.
Long ago.
Didn't inhale. Marcel said you didn't inhale, Bernard. You and Bill Clinton didn't inhale.
I quit smoking when I came back from Korea as a soldier.
I thought you were going to say you quit smoking when you were 12.
Yes, and yes, our synagogue. Okay, want to jump to our synagogue was just around the corner, and I remember every Friday, or I had to take the challah and the cholent to the baker, which was right in that building, the same building, and. On Saturday, after prayers in the synagogue, which was in the same building, we went and got the cholent, and we got the baked goods, which was a cake, chocolate cake, which was actually cocoa, and it was poppy seeds. And of course, all the way on the home, I found places that were uneven on the cake, which gave me a little piece of chocolate cake or poppy seed cake. So we were a happy family. I was the youngest of 4, and.
Bernard, I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes, and I want to talk a little bit about. We want to move forward and talk a little bit about your experience in the camps. But Zosia, I have a question for you, because your experience is so different. And in a moment, we're going to talk with Bernard and Marcel about the camps. And today was as the anniversary of Auschwitz-Birkenau liberation. I want to talk a little bit about their experiences in the camp. But that wasn't your experience in hiding. Was a very different experience, and also obviously a terrifying and a difficult experience in a different way. I know there were some times when you had a close call. There were some times when you were, a couple times, I think, if I remember, that you were almost discovered. Can you talk a little bit about maybe one of those times that you and your mother, who were in hiding, were extorted, were blackmailed, and had to deal with that?
Asking me?
Yes.
So no, I thought about we lived like peacefully in little village, but one day a policeman in plain clothes came to our home in the evening.
A Polish policeman.
A Polish policeman, but he was in plain clothes.
Yeah.
He said he is a policeman, and that he knew that we are Jews, and we had to take us to Gestapo. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand what it does mean, but anyway, I saw that my mother was terrified, and she talked with him long time, and he took something, simply saying he was bribed, and he went away, but came back. It was the same story again. A mother again bribed him, but next time she decided that we have to escape. And he found another flat in another village, and we went to another village, escaped from him. I don't know that he couldn't find or didn't want to anymore. Anyway, we lived in the other little village. Anyway, that is part of Krakow now. And I just lived like, I played with children, I went to school, and I was very good in religion. I could tell you.
Zosia, did you have a story like when you moved? So did you remember, did your mother say, oh, tell the other children that we moved because?
No, he just said we have to go away because this terrible man could come again. and she had took it like a wagon and put our poor things on it, and we just escaped.
Zosia,
So,
how many times did your mother save your life?
during all the war. First to obtaining on false document, then to decide that we stay outside the ghetto, then to organize our escape from this blackmailer. Well, and all the time she was the one who rescued me, my mother. He was brave and strong, and he was like imagination and very, very strong will.
It sounds like sounds a little bit like somebody I know, Zosia, a little bit. But because today I want to talk about this place that has such different meaning for all of us in many different ways. Whether we are, for Zosia, whose father was killed there, for Bernard and Marcel, who lost people there, but were prisoners there and left there. To all of us who visit there and ride away from there together. It's today the camp was liberated by the Soviets 77 years ago. Marcel, tell us about, do you remember when you arrived at Auschwitz? What were you thinking about Auschwitz? What did you know about Auschwitz when you arrived?
Well, I remember arriving in Auschwitz by passenger train from Grossrosen.
Mm-hmm.
During liquidation of Warsaw, this is going back to May 1944. There was the 14th of May was the first major liquidation of Warsaw. And on that day, there was a major selection of people who are going to remain in Warsaw, and the children were all destined to be sent to Birkenau. So I was during this selection, I remember it was a very hot day. There was all the camp population of Warsaw was standing on the upper Platz and undergoing selections, and children were standing on the edge of the upper Platz. And I remember it was maybe 300 or 400 children in the group that I was standing, and the women were crying. There was large the commandant was surrounded, was standing on the mount, surrounded by his entourage. And every once in a while, somebody would come and pick up a child from our group, from the group of children. Just take out and carry away. And I knew that from the cries of the women, I knew that there was something going to happen to the children. I made up a story that, and I became aware that some people from the children that I knew in the group, they was taken away to a safer place. But I knew that, and nobody came to pick me up, like.
It's 7 o'clock.
Pardon?
No, go ahead.
No.
No, sorry. So it was a very tense moment. And then I realized that I was terrified to see my father rushing from the crowds of the people, rushing into the direction of the commandant, and I was just terrified to see this happening because nobody was ever able to get so close to the commandant without being shot. And my father ran, grabbed his boots, and you know, right away the soldiers from the commandant's entourage tried to separate them. There was a brief struggle, but my father would not go off his boots, and he was begging him to let him pick me up from the crowd of children. And this maybe lasted for maybe 5-10 seconds. I don't know. It was a very brief encounter. And as a result, the commandant let him take me away from the crowd, from the group of children. So he came to me, picked me up, and he took me away. And took me to a safe place. And this is how I survived. I became part of the transport that went to Grossrosen with many fathers and many children from that selection. And we ended up in Grossrosen.
And how long were you there before you got to Auschwitz?
In my recollection, I have a problem with the timing, but I think I was no more than 10 days in Grossrosen.
And do you remember arriving at Auschwitz?
Yes, I remember very well. Yeah, we were traveling by passenger train, arriving in Auschwitz on the main, in the city railroad station, and we were marched to the camp, to Auschwitz, what is called Auschwitz I today, and we spent the night there.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning, we were escorted by the Germans from Auschwitz to Birkenau. We walked to be admitted. I mean, we didn't know, but to the shower on the Entlausung and the admission. So I remember when we arrived at the bath to be shower. I remember my father asked the attendant if this is a real shower or is this a gas chamber.
So it was already knowledge of what wasn't any secret at that point, but toward the end of the war, what was happening.
Yeah, my father knew, and I remember him asking, and he was reassured. No, everything is okay. It's just a shower, and so that's what happened. Really, we got rid of our clothes, and they were disinfected. And we took a shower, and then we got our clothes back. I had my clothes that I brought from ghetto, actually. Still had them in Warsaw and then in Birkenau. And then we were tattooed. So just 2 years ago, I met one of the kids that was with me on that being tattooed. So I met him on the 70th anniversary in Auschwitz.
And was his number? What was his number close to yours?
He's 8 numbers away from me.
Yeah, the Germans were very efficient, very orderly.
Eugene Ginter. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in touch with him all the time.
Amazing. Bernard, what about you? Do you remember arriving? I know you were in 5 camps, but I wanted to just ask, wanted to ask about Auschwitz-Birkenau. Do you remember arriving?
I remember arriving, but I want to back up to what Marcel was saying about the children in Prussia. We were all on the Appellplatz together. And for me, I was one of the children put on horse-drawn wagons. 3 horse-drawn wagons were taken out of the Warsaw camp. And along the way, on Wieliczka Street, I overheard one of the guards who had a black uniform, probably was a Ukrainian, yes, and that we were going to be shot. So a number of us boys jumped from the wagon and started running in all directions. I heard shooting, but I kept running, and I escaped. Proof is that I'm here, and I was hidden. I was in hiding, and then I went to a Polish family whose name was Zieliński, and they hid me for one night, and they gave me some food, but I had to go back to out into the unknown because they were at the risk of being shot if I was found there. Mm-hmm. So I went back and I hid in the Catholic cemetery on Wieliczka Street. It's an old cemetery that's no longer in use. And then I ended up making contact with an uncle of mine who I knew was in a camp called Gulag, which was in Krakow near the train station. And anyways, after making contact with him, I hid in a building that was being destroyed for the building material. And he said to me, you know, I don't know how to help you, but you can come back with us when we go back to work. So when we go back to the camp. So I said, no, thank you. And it's then that I went to the Polish family, which I mentioned, the Zieliński family. It's important for me to mention people who saved my life. And then I repeated the same thing, hid in the same place, and made contact with my uncle again. And he said, will you march in with us to the Gulag camp? And what he did is he told me, when we march in, you'll be held up by 2 men. Lift your feet up off the ground, and so your feet are not showing, and because they count. And I don't know how he knew to tell me to lift up my feet. And the answer for me has come many years later, is that they were tired of watching the faces of us prisoners walking in. So they were counting feet, and he knew that. Wow. So I smuggled myself in to a concentration camp called Gulag. No, so ending up in Auschwitz, which was the, after Gulag, I was sent back to Prussia, and from there it was liquidated, and we were sent to Mauthausen instead by train, long journey, people dying in the cattle car. And I met with my brothers, both my brothers and my father in Mauthausen. And we were separated. My father and I were sent to Auschwitz after maybe 5 days, 6 days, something like that. So that's how I got to Auschwitz. And Auschwitz is a whole other story.
I wish we had time to do. Maybe we'll have to do a second part with the three of you. I'm just conscious of the time, and I apologize for cutting you off and not listening. There's so much to talk about, but we are a little limited. I want to maybe start, and I would suggest that we maybe think about doing a second part at a certain point in the future. But I want to go to Zosia and move a little bit forward toward the. Do you remember the war ending? Do you remember being free? Do you remember what the moment when you were able to? Did you lose this previous identity? Did your mother say, "Okay, now everything is safe"? Was it automatic, or was it a slower process?
I even remember the moment, like German already escaped from this place. Some Russian, almost anyway, some soldier from Red Army came to our house, and like only in the film, he just asked for something to drink. He got this way, and he went. This ball of a bite, invite everybody and put on the stall a bottle of vodka, just to drink for the victory. And then the German escape. And sometimes after that, we took again wagon and went our way to Krakow. And we cannot come back to our previous place, but we got another, and I like, you see, and I don't even want to remember the war. I didn't want to remember anything. I just always wanted to go on.
Absolutely.
Go on.
Absolutely. Marcel, tell us about that day 77 years ago. Tell us about January, what you remember, January 27th, 1945.
Was a very bright, sunny day, much different from the day before, where we were led in a column to somewhere, I don't know. But on that day in the morning, sun was shining, and we could see the Russians breaking through the fence. On the snow, there was the fields were full of fresh snow, and the Russians were wearing white camouflage like bed sheets, and this is how they entered the camp from the side of the women camp now in Birkenau. So this it was let me tell you, it was a very happy day for many people. So it's hard to imagine what was going on. Yeah.
You got chocolate, huh?
Yeah, so we got candies, and the Russians were very kind to us. Lucky for us, they didn't have much in the way of food. Like the Americans were more generous with food, which was actually harming the prisoner.
After your complete severe malnutrition, it was so much. So you were lucky. Yeah.
So we were lucky. So this is what happened. I realized that we were being liberated, and I promised my parents, my mother and my father, that when the war ends, this was like for me, the war ended right there, but I didn't realize where they were, and I promised them to meet at our apartment in Koletek 7 when the war ends. So my mission was to get to Koletek 7 as quickly as I could. So this is why you are walking every
not every year, Marcel.
Not
as strong as
yeah, that was Never again, right?
We should have been, I'll tell you what though, Marcel, we should have, next time, if I do it again, and I don't think I will, but I will stop at Koletek 7 on the way to the JCC.
Yeah, yeah.
It's what, 10 kilometers, no?
From Koletek 7 to the JCC is probably 400 meters maybe.
Yeah.
Very close, very, very close. As we as we come to a close, I want to, Bernard, what today people, we're thinking of, we're thinking about the Holocaust, many of us are thinking about it every day in some sense. But I think we all agree that what's most important is to make sure that something like this never happens to us or to anybody else ever again. So Bernard, can you maybe give us some last words about what the message is, how to, and I see Marcel is holding up the hashtag we remember, absolutely. What do we do, Bernard? And you've thought and you've devoted your life to peace and to supporting others and for so many years. How do we make sure that something like this doesn't happen again? How do we make sure that the children don't go through what the three of you went through?
Well, I don't think we can make sure. I think the only thing we can do is to change our lives in the way in which we respect and love other people and ourselves, of course. It's through that process that change will come. Any other way, and having a gun and having all that, it doesn't work in the end. It absolutely does not. So we must respect and love other people. We don't have to totally agree with it, but we need to have respect other people and their way of believing.
Amen.
It's
Amen.
actually that simple.
Amen. Beautiful words. Zosia, final thought. Are you optimistic about Jewish life here in Krakow?
Well, yes, I am. You see, I want, and my message is like Shamor v'Zachor. It is not only about Shabbat, it's about us. We have to remember, it means Zachor, and it means also to help others remember. That's why we talk our stories. And Shamor, for me, means we have go on and build something. That's why I am so happy in JCC, because every day we're doing something, we're doing something.
Yeah, we're moving forward.
Marcel, there's a rumor that at the end of June, you and Marilla will be here in Krakow. Is that true?
Be'ezrat Hashem.
We wanted.
Zosia, Bernard, Marcel, Marilla, I love you. I miss you guys. Oh, ride for the living. Avi, do you have a last, just final rabbinic words for us?
I do. It's such an inspiration just being able to see you, physically see you and hear you and be so friendly with you and love you so much. There's an amazing verse in Isaiah that for thousands of years, Jews have been recording and reusing. The verse says, "V'hayu einecha ro'ot et morecha." The blessing will be that your own eyes will see your teachers, will see your role models, will see the righteous people, and that will guide you in your lives. And I think that we all have had this amazing ability through the JCC's amazing podcast to see these. You are our teachers, you are our light, and you are our guides. And we thank you so much.
Amen.
Thank you. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Bravo.
Thank you. Be well, everybody. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you,
Pani.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody.
Sad for hosting.
Thank you.